Ora, mentre il beato era in ritiro da solo, sorse in lui questo pensiero. Questo sentiero, ossia i 4 fondamenti della consapevolezza, è un sentiero che va verso una sola direzione, verso la purificazione degli esseri, verso il superamento dell'afflizione e della mente, verso la scomparsa del dolore e del dispiacere, verso l'ottenimento del vero scopo, verso la liberazione e la realizzazione del Nibbana.
Whether one is listening to this in Myanmar or from outside the country, we know it is a very difficult time for those of us who hold the Golden Land and its people in our hearts. In trying times like these, we can all use a bit more care and compassion in our lives. So on behalf of the team here at Insight Myanmar, I would like to say, in the traditional way metta is offered, may you be free from physical discomfort. May you be free from mental discomfort. May you not meet dangers or enemies. May you live a peaceful and happy life. And may all beings be free and come out of suffering. And with that, let's move on to the show. I'm really looking forward to this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast. This has been a long time coming, but I think it's going to be very worth the wait. To give some background before we get into today's conversation, we're going to be talking about a 20th century Italian Buddhist monk whose Pali name was U Lokānatha. We've already done one episode about him that will be linked to this, and I encourage our listeners to check that out. That was with a colleague of today's guest we talked to before, Antonio Costanza. And today we're going to be continuing the conversation that we started. I should mention the conversation we had was before the Myanmar military coup. I think it might have been before the pandemic. And so we had meant to have these discussions earlier, but life and world events got in the way. So we're returning to them now. I'm very happy that we are. And we've had listeners come back to us and ask where these next episodes are coming. They're really intrigued to listen. So I'm glad that we're able to get to this now. And I think our listeners will find this as fascinating as I do. So in the second part of our series, this is with the guest Lorenzo Maria Colombo. We are going to be going deeper into the biography and the story of his research and his team's research into U Lokānatha and learning more about him. And I'm incredibly excited for what follows and to be able to bring this amazing story to our wider audience. So, Lorenzo, we've been trying to connect for so long. I'm so happy that we're doing so now. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you to you.
So let's kick off right away with learning more about this great Italian monk, U Lokānatha. Let's get first to his early origins and childhood before he found Buddhism. Can you tell us a bit about how he grew up, his family life, and then what initially got him attracted to the Dhamma?
Yes, well, we call him the first Italian Buddhist monk, but actually he was American Italian because he was born in Cervinara. That is a quite small town in southern Italy. And in 1886. But when he was very young, his parents went to America because there was an economic crisis, much like today. And many southern Italians went to the America. So he grew up in New York, and he went to school. He had an opportunity of scholastic education much more profound that what Italian boys will have at this time. At this time, and he became a chemist. He studied chemistry, and while he was studying chemistry, he became somewhat disaffectionate with his religion, because he was, of course, his parents were of course, Roman Catholics, but he said, I started. I don't like. I found something missing in Catholicism. He said, my religion started to become the religion of science. So it was what we would call a positivist, maybe. And but also positivism is there is only materiality in positivism. No, is there is no space for the mind, that is a natural component of the human being. So, long story short, one time he was working in a important industry in Cincinnati, if I remember correctly. And one of his colleagues gave him a book. In this book, there was one of the early translation of the life of the Buddha of Asvagosha, and the Dhammapada. And according to the story, you read the first line of the Dhammapada. Mano pupanga mamaga mano setta mano maya. The mind is precede all things. All things are made of mind. And they had some like of epiphany. Bam! This is my way, he said. He said, I was like a man in a desert, who is dying with thirst, and then suddenly find a oasis, a pool of fresh water, and drink to the his heart content. And he began to read every book about Buddhism he could put his hand on, but in of course in America there was no true Buddhist culture. So one day he abandoned completely his family, his work. He gave up everything and went to first India, then Sri Lanka, and finally in Burma, where he was ordained in 1925.
Yeah, thank you for that background, that biographical background of U Lokānatha. And as we're looking at his early origins, he comes from this Roman Catholic family. I think all of his most of the men in his family are priests, actually. So there's kind of a suggestion that maybe he should.
Yeah, his brother became a bishop. Yes, and the other brother became he also became a scientist, and was one of the scientists who discovered the radar technology.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
How unusual was it that someone living his early life in a Catholic background and between New York and Italy is then has this interest in the Dhamma and the Buddhist teachings and Buddhism, and becomes intrigued to learn more? How unusual is that? And what do you think in Buddhism was calling out from U Lokānatha? I think Salvador, I think, was his Italian name.
His actual name as a lay person was Salvatore Natale. Salvatore means the Savior, like Jesus Christ, no? And Natale is Christmas, because he was born on the day after Christmas, in the Saint Stephen holiday. So he gave him the name. And yes, it's quite unusual. And I think that also when he was a child or young boy, he had some I don't know if I call what we call I think he had some tendencies toward some aspect of the Dharma. For example, when he was a small boy, he found a bird on the roof of his house in New York, and he tried to bring to his parents. Well, can we have it like he was his pet, no? And sadly, his parents were basically killed the bird and tried to eat the animal. And he said, the young Salvatore said, I caused the death of this animal, so I have to die too. And he started some sort of hunger strike until his mother asked him, please forgive me, I won't do that anymore. And he said, okay, mother, I forgive you. And he started to eat again. But he was ready to give up his life for the sake of the life of this animal. He said in one of the discourses much later, he said, this is the proof that in one of my past life I was already a Buddhist, he said.
That's a powerful story in early childhood, showing certain kind of ethical values and compassion for all beings. I still wonder, though, in terms of like theology and culture, conditioning, convention, community, all of these things, it's something. It's really something to grow up in a certain place. With certain values and expectations, and then have this intrinsic interest for something so different from where you come. And I think for that era, even more so, because, you know, today we have internet and everything internet provides, and the forums and the questions and the online communities we can find. But we're talking about over 100 years ago, where,
Yes.
as you yourself has said, the resources are so few. Even learned people in Western society don't necessarily have a strong understanding of who the Buddha was and what he taught and what Buddhist societies are, what they're doing in contemporary times. And so in your study of him, how did you come to learn or to understand the forces within him that compelled him to, before going so far away physically, conceptually, he had to travel such a distance. So what propelled him to conceptually travel so far from everything where he was raised?
Okay, I think he was feeling what in Buddhism they call the samvega, no, the urgency. If he felt using a expression typical of the Buddhist culture, he felt the world was on fire. He could not find satisfaction in the in the world, in the mundane world, no. If you think the time, it was the what you call today the Roaring Twenties, no. If you have read the Great Gatsby, the Rolls Royce, the parties, and he said there is nothing in this for me. There is only boring. There is no true satisfaction in the sensual pleasure, in the riches, in the apparently happiness of this world. So I think he was already prepared to become a Buddhist before reading the Buddhist books. For what is my impression. And also we should remember that at this time he was in Italy. There was no trace of Buddhism. Only in the academic circles there were some Buddhist scholar. For example, one of the most famous is Giuseppe Tucci, an Tibetan explorer that was initiated, if I remember correctly, in the Sakyapa lineage of the esoteric Tibetan Buddhism, but at the level of the normal people, no one know about Buddhism. Was something like African animism or something like that, or some strange cult, not. So yes, it was as I said, an epiphany, and maybe he was already prepared to a step that he had in his destiny. We could call in his karma better.
So he had these forces that were compelling him to want to be interested and take these steps, and it sounds like his own inner exploration and vision for what he wanted to find was met with, even though there weren't many resources in terms of people or books available, what he did find in the Buddhist teachings intrigued him enough that he wanted to take another step on that path, both conceptually and physically.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And another thing I noticed is that even his early contact with Buddhist culture was not enough for him. In India there was no trace of Buddhism. Only in Bangladesh at this time, I intend. Only in Bangladesh, I think there were some small groups of Buddhists, but in India there was only the holy places he visited. He not found anything, and also in Sri Lanka. I had reading his discourses, his biography. I had the impression he was not. It was not sufficient for him. You remember that in Sri Lanka at this time, Buddhism was very influenced by Western theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, and all these occultist package.
Right.
It had a really important role, but theosophism in, for example, Buddhist school in Sri Lanka. But I had this impression. I have no proof to confirm that, but I think it was too much westernized. Was too much westernized for him, and in Sri Lanka he met a monk that said to him, "If you want to know what Buddhism really is, you have to go to Burma." And so he does, and he did, and he actually became a Buddhist monk in Burma, not in Sri Lanka.
And before we get to his time in Burma in 1925, which I really want to get to, I'm so fascinated by that. First, just practically, how does he, in the 1920s, 1925, practically speaking, how does he get from Italy to Burma at that time?
No, he went from America to Burma, to India, then Sri Lanka and Burma. In the first trip was by ship. From America. In his second trip, there was a year later from Italy to Burma. He went by feet, and it was
that's incredible.
It was a very long trip. It was a 2-year trip when he was assaulted by bandits. Menaced at gunpoint, taken for a spy, arrested. It was a very adventurous trip. Yes, if you read his biography, you don't it's not a boring biography. It's not it's very very interesting.
Well, and his family hid his passport because they refused to let him leave, right?
First of all, you must remember that, as I said, he was practically the only Buddhist monk in Italy. One. And two, in Italy at this time there was fascism. That if you know something about fascists, there are not much propense to religious tolerance. So they tried to they took his passport and tried to convince him to become a Franciscan monk. That if you want to be a monk, yes, but at least be a Franciscan, a Christian monk. And of course he said no, and he did another hunger strike until they gave up. When he was nearly dead, they okay, don't die. His uncle said, please don't die in my house. I give your passport. Go where you want. And he contacted another Buddhist scholar, Italian Buddhist scholar, is Giuseppe De Lorenzo, who is a very important figure because he was one of the early translator of the Buddhist canon in Italian. And Giuseppe De Lorenzo said, no, here in Italy you have no place. The better solution is you go back in Burma, and he did so in this trip that I mentioned earlier.
Right. So that brings us to the first part of his story, looking at being in Burma in 1925 and ordaining as a Buddhist monk. I imagine that the full story, as tempting as it is, as tantalizing as it is to want to know in full color detail the stories of this this Roman Catholic Italian who's landed in Buddhist Burma, we should say British colonial Buddhist Burma at that time, and is trying to become a monk. I mean, I just have endless questions of things I want to know and endless curiosity. I'm sure that you do too. And probably many of those questions will never be satisfied, unfortunately. But tell us what we do know.
Because he, when he went for the first time to Burma, he stopped all contact with his family and went into a radio silence. And even after that, he practically spoke only not much about his early stay in Burma. What we would know is that in this second trip, he went at least for a period of time on the northern region of Burma, on the Himalaya range, where he had some sort of meditation retreat. And there is one occasion in one of his discourses that mention one. I think we think he mentioned a strange Buddhist tradition, Buddha Vachana, that is a Theravada tradition, but with an esoteric bent, much like Tibetan Buddhism and Shingon Buddhism in Japan. It exists still today, but it's very small, and his adepts are only a few. And there is, as I said, there is only one reference in one of his discourses in which he says that the adept of this tradition, when they are near death, they start a sort of anapanasati, of breath meditation, and they maintain the awareness, the mental sati, even in the moment of the death. So they, in this moment, they can realize nibbana, the freedomness, and this is the, as I said, the only one reference. But it's very interesting because after this meditation retreat, the people who met him said he was completely changed. was another person. He had a strange magnetism, a strange charm that he hadn't before, and the story became quite strange, quite weird. Someone said that he developed what in Buddhism called the Hiddhi, the supernormal power. For example, someone said that he was able to tame wild animals or reading minds. Of course, is quite strange. We have no proof of this, but is interesting that this period, this of meditation retreat changed him completely, and also changed the perception other people had of him.
Mm. It's great to just to hear and reflect on this a time so long ago from our own where these encounters are happening, and to reflect upon what it must have been like during that time. It's just so interesting, and and like you, I'm also just so curious to want to know more about what his time in Burma was. And so he makes several touches in Burma. The first one is here in 1925. And
Yes.
Tell us how long he stayed, anything else about the visit that hasn't been addressed yet, and then he leaves Burma to go back to Italy, I believe, before
Yes.
returning back to Burma again, which we'll get into. But tell us about this part.
Okay, in the first trip, it was only 6 months, and he tried what we can reconstruct about from his discourses. He tried the ascetic practices. For example, he tried to sleep in the cemeteries. He tried to never lie down, to sleep on the sitting position. But I think it was too early for him to try this time. So he became very sick. He developed a strong sickness. So he had to return to Italy in his uncle's house to heal, because he was exerting himself too much in his practice. And this as I said, is a very short part of his life, is the first trip. And the second trip was much longer. He met his teacher, his meditation teacher, Lun Sayadaw, and maybe also we are not sure what this. Also, Mahasi Sayadaw, that I think all many people know him, is one of the most known Anapadasati and Vipassana teacher of 20th century, Mahasi Sayadaw. And yes, this is his second stay, and he also studied. I know, sorry, I don't remember the name of his teacher. He's also started to study the Buddhist canon and the Abhidhamma. They said that the other monks were stupefied, because he was of course a stranger, but he was already capable to memorize many pages of the Buddhist canon, respect the other monks that were studying with him.
Right. So he goes back to Italy, and his purpose in going back to Italy, I believe, is to start conversion. Is that right?
Well, his mainly purpose was to heal, because, as I said, he became very sick. But he said, "Well, I go to Italy. In Italy, there is the Pope, so I can try to convert the Pope to Buddhism, and maybe also Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader. Maybe I can also convince him to become a Buddhist, so
Did he really try?
No, neither the Pope nor Mussolini ever received him, but the intention was this, yes. And who knows? Maybe if they receive him, the story will be different. But sadly, no, they never received him. And he tried also when he was again in Italy in the 50s. He tried again to went to Vatican City to convert the Pope, but he also never received. One of my dreams is to meet the Pope and give the Pope the book about Lokānatha. So maybe not Lokānatha in person, but maybe my book will arrive finally in the hand of the Pope. It's quite improbable, but I hope that it is.
I can't help laugh when I hear this, because you think about the zeal and the eagerness of kind of the Westerner who sits his first Vipassana course and is just filled with all of this transcendent wisdom, and I know I was, and just everyone should do this, this is the greatest thing ever. And
yes.
I crack up thinking that he took it to an extreme. He was so full of joy and excitement from the Buddha's message that he's like, I've got to convert the Pope, I've got to convert Mussolini. This is just, it's unbelievable to hear.
I wrote the book with a Buddhist monk that is Venerable Metananda, and I have to mention him because he was one of the author of the book. He translated many of the discourses that you find in the book. And he said that probably there was some kind of Vipassana Upakilesa, that is the imperfection of insight. That is when you are in the early stages of meditation. There are many phenomena that happens. For example, you see lights, you hear the voices, and one of the typical phenomenon is this extraordinary zeal that became sometimes excessive. Like, for example, I will try to convert all the world to Buddhism.
Right. So this is kind of the beginning of these extraordinary names that we start to associate with U Lokānatha. I mean, when you pull the list of internationally famous names that he interacted with, either personally or attempted to interact with, it again, it just blows the mind who this figure was and what he was navigating. So the next figure we can bring into this is Ambedkar. I think a lot of listeners will know who Ambedkar is, some will not. So can you first describe who Ambedkar is and how U Lokānatha got associated with him?
Well, Ambedkar is was a Indian politician. Indian society was and already in part is divided into classes, into caste in Varnas. No, there is the nobles, the priest, and you go down, and when you find at the bottom of the society the outcast, the paria, the chandala, they call them, the dog eaters, with there are discriminated. They, especially back at the time, they can go to the school, the school of the others. They can't go to the hospitals. They are emarginated and so on. Ambedkar was an outcast, but he had the opportunity to study in an English school. He studied also in United Kingdom, and when he came back to India, he started a political movement of freedom of the lower classes. And of course, one of his first important steps was to reject Hinduism, because Hinduism was seen as the religion of the oppressors, or of the upper classes that want to maintain the chandalas in their lower status. And he had some sort of rivalry with another important politic figure of the time, that is Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was an upper class born politician, and he tried to maintain the status quo of the classes. Ambedkar was trying to introduce the Western concept of society as equal society, where the rights are even distributed between the population. And when Venerable Lokanatha, in one of his trip to India, because one of his his goals was to bring back Buddhism in India. In one of his trip by feet, from Burma to India by feet, I had this this thing for feet trip into land far away. In one of his trip, he heard that Ambedkar had rejected Hinduism, and he found an opportunity. He tried to meet Ambedkar, and he did this time, and tried to convince him to convert to Buddhism. He wrote many letters to Ambedkar. He wrote a pamphlet that called "The Truth Will Set You Free," that distributed in the lower class, in the slums where the Chandala lived, to try to convince not only Ambedkar but all the Chandala population to convert to Buddhism. And he said, if you want to be free externally, politically, socially, you have to learn first to become free inside. And the way to become free inside is not Hinduism, is Buddhism. And at the first, and I think Ambedkar was not ready to become a Buddhist right away. He said, "Yes, I think, but I'm not sure." And but it was only after the World War II that he finally said, "Okay, I convert to Buddhism."
Sure. So thanks for giving that background into Ambedkar and his work in India to convert many of these untouchable Dalit into Buddhism, the biggest conversion in history, I believe it is.
Yes, in the historical in the historical record of this the past century, at least, half a million of a conversion of half a million of people is the biggest mass conversion of the time. Yes.
And what do we know of U Lokānatha's relation with Ambedkar in this process?
Well, he maintained a contact with him with letters, also during the war, because during the war, Venerable Lokanatha sadly was imprisoned by the British Army, because he had still an Italian passport. And as you know, Italian and England were enemies during the war. So he was imprisoned in a concentration camp, and he had no opportunity to meet Ambedkar in person for the years of the war. And even during his stay in this concentration camp, this is another bit of his life that we know much about. He gave some tantalizing accounts. For example, he said, one time I tried to convert my fellow prisoners, and the British soldiers tried to burn me alive. I don't know if it's only a metaphor of his, they actually tried to kill him, but he reacted in this occasion, and also in another occasion when they tried to take away his robe and give him the uniform of the prisoners. He said, "No, I want to maintain my uniform, my robe, because I am a monk. This is the sign of my status as a monk. You can take me away this." So he started an hunger strike in the concentration camp until the guards gave up and gave his robe back to him. And he maintained, as I said, a contact with Ambedkar, and I think that they had some sort of agreement to the exact date of Ambedkar conversion. I have no proof of this, but many years before this conversion, that was in 1956, he said, you in many of these Lokānatha, in many of his discourses, said, you people, you have to wait to this year, 1956, because in this year will happen something important, something that will bring back Buddhism into India and then in all world. And this date was not chosen at random. Was chosen, I think, with a purpose, because this is according to the Eastern calendar, the exact half of the Buddhist sasana, the dispensation of the Buddha, that will last 5,000 years, and the exact half is the year 56, sorry.
And that was the conversion of Ambedkar.
There was the conversion of Ambedkar. I think there was some sort of agreement before, because it's too strange that it was exactly that year, the year after the sixth Buddhist big Buddhist Theravada Council. Is too precise. Is too pinpoint to be only a casualty. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that there was some sort of premeditation of this.
Right. That's really interesting. And of course, he was imprisoned by the British as he was taking yet another of his treks, when he was walking on foot from one place to another in the Himalayas when he was imprisoned, and insisted that his robes transcended his nationality, that they transcended politics, and that he demanded that he not be a prisoner of war because he was a Buddhist monk and should be seen in that vocation rather than through his identity as an Italian. And the British obviously didn't agree, but he then spent this time in as a POW and was released after World War II, as you mentioned, trying to not wasting any time, still with his same zeal. Instead of going from trying to convert Mussolini and the Pope, he's now trying to convert prisoners of war. He's at a POW camp trying to convince the other prisoners to convert to Buddhism, and the British don't like that. So this kind of this newfounded zeal has not been tempered at all, and we'll see that throughout his life.
No. During his stay in the concentration camp, he also tried to. He actually wrote a letter to Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, Churchill, and the Emperor Hirohito of Japan, and tried to convince them to stop the war. And he said that in one of his discourses, he said that he has perfect knowledge that there was no chance that this will happen. But he said, I had at least to make the gesture, because there is one interesting thing that many Buddhists at this time, it's quite strange to think of this, but many Buddhists, especially of course in Japan, were not at all contrary to war, because in Japan, for example, there was a tradition of what they call Kodobukyo, that is Buddhism of the imperial way, that is some sort of a syncretism between Buddhist and Shinto, with the emperor as a central role, that see the war as an occasion to bring unity to Asia under the Buddhist flag. And Lokānatha, in the first stage of his Buddhist experience as a Buddhist monk, was quite of this idea. When the war started, he gave up completely this perspective and started to talk strongly against any form of violence. He said, no, the war is wrong. It is ever wrong. Even if you make war for apparently a cause that is rightful, kill another human being, you are not a hero. You go to hell without doubt. And in this time, in particular time of our history, I think that maybe this is the most important lesson of Venerable Lokānatha. In fact, I tried to publish many of his discourses against war on the net, because I think that sadly the many years are passed, but the human stupidity is still the same.
Yeah, that's great. And I think we should put him in a little bit of time and context now, because in these years, the kind of mid-century, mid-20th century we're looking at, there's a couple of points to note here. First, obviously, this is the Cold War happening after World War II, and this is separating and breaking the world down. Another feature to mention is that there really was kind of a pan-Buddhist movement that swept over Asia at this time, and didn't succeed until today. So we don't really see this today. I mean, now Buddhisms are somewhat nationalistic. In the different Buddhist countries.
The prophecies of the expansion of Buddhism in all the world actually happened, and it started with many Buddhist preachers of the world. And Lokānatha was one of the early attempt to bring Buddhism in the Western countries in a form that was not elitarist. As I said, in Italy there were Buddhists before Lokānatha, for example, in Italy. But were in the academy, in the scientist circles, not in the normal people life. He went to, after the war, he went first to America and then in Europe to bring a form of Buddhism that was capable to catch the interest of the normal people that know nothing about Buddhism before. And I think in America he failed, almost failed, because at the first time he was seen as some sort of I don't know, trickster, some sort of con man, and was not very well received. In Europe, he started some little groups of people, not Buddhist, but people interested in Buddhism that still are living today. So his lineage continue even today. The lineage of Venerable Lokānatha that started back at the time.
And we also have to place him in this period of nuclear nonproliferation. This
Yes.
becomes a cause he takes up. And it's very interesting because, I mean, number one, we have to look at that this was a huge fear of this time. So it's not like, I think now if someone is concerned about nuclear nonproliferation, it's kind of a more of a passion project or something that they particularly have found a way to care about, like environmentalism or whatever else. But at that time, this was a major fear of the world. There were television shows and movies and newspapers that were predicting and fearing what could happen with nuclear bombs being dropped. And so what's so interesting is that and of course you have the Cuban Missile Crisis, you have so many important events that are happening post World War II that are just heightening the doomsday clock and those fears. And he steps in as a Westerner who understands science, who understands geopolitical matters, and is using his understanding of the Buddha's teaching and the Dhamma to be able not just to speak about the importance of peace and overcoming this nuclear threat, but also even in the way that he talks about the splitting of atoms and his technical understanding of science. He's using a Buddhist framework in his discourses to be able to break down and understand both the science behind the nuclear threat as well as the need for global peace to prevent global annihilation, correct?
Oh, correct. He said in one of his masterpieces, Buddhism is a Buddhist bomb of love, of metta, no?
Right,
Is universal, universal. He said one important thing, because there were many people that said we must start a politic of disarmament, we put away all our weapon, and he said it's not sufficient to destroy all weapon in the world, because if you are not at peace within yourself, there is always the potential of war inside your heart. And strangely, he used an example not from the Buddhist text, but from the Catholic Bible, in the letter of I think Saint James, where he said, you must fight. There are passion that fight inside you. No, the passion inside your heart is what cause war, not the weapon. A weapon is only a thing. If you have no need to take a gun in your hand and shoot, a gun doesn't kill anybody. Is your mind, your intention to hate, to kill, that kill someone, not a gun. So he said.
Right. That's so powerful. And we're jumping around all over his story now, just looking at where different parts of his life sequentially fit into what he was doing in these different eras. Maybe before we go ahead and look into his Hollywood years, which are just incredible and fascinating again, let's go back to Burma and let's look at his time in Burma, what we know of that. We know that he was friends with the great Burmese monks Lun Sayadaw and Webu Sayadaw, both of whom are presumed to be fully enlightened people. What do we know of his association with those two?
Well, we know that they were his teacher, and we think that is not certain, because we have only an oral testimony, but they said that recognized him as a bodhisattva, because he met Webu Sayadaw. The story goes that he met Webu Sayadaw for the last time in his life, his old teacher, and he said, "Well, teacher, will we met again later?" And apparently, Webu Sayadaw said, "No, because you want to become a Buddha. You have to stay here many times. I have no, and I for myself I have no such an ambition. So no, we will never met again after this life." And this is I think an important, if it's true, is quite important, because in Theravada tradition there is not much emphasis on the bodhisattva thing, no, on the concept of become a Buddha and stay here. You can reach enlightenment, but your meta maintain you here in this world, because you want to be able to help other people. And he was also he was not an Asian man. He was an Italian man. He was a stranger. So being recognized as a bodhisattva is, I repeat, if it's true, is a important sign of the consideration of the man at the time.
Right. And um, so concerning his meditation experience, we know that he did some meditating in the Himalayas. And I'm wondering what we know about what type of meditation he practiced, what technique, as well as if there were influences with Sun Lun and Webu.
Not much, because in his discourses he speak very little about meditation techniques. He was most concerned with basic moral teaching, like not violence. He was a strong vegetarian. You know, in Theravada tradition there is not much emphasis on the vegetarian diet, but he was a vegetarian. He said, "No, you must, you shouldn't eat meat. You shouldn't be kind with all animals, and etc." And so, as I said, it didn't speak much about meditation. What we know is he speak about anapanasati. So maybe he was following the anapanasati vipassana tradition. Sometime he speak about kasina meditation. You know what the meditation on the color disc. You have in front of you a color disc, and you can and he speak about the meditation on the elements, and the four on the four the four Brahma Vihara, the Metta, Karuna, etc. He don't speak much about meditation, but I think he was practicing something very similar to modern vipassana meditation. We are not sure, but I think this is most probable hypothesis.
Right. And then in looking at beyond the meditation, do we have any examples or accounts of some of the psychic powers he might have developed?
Well, yes, very. For example, we have an account when he was. There was some jealousy in the monastery because he was a Westerner, and was some kind of dislike of him because he was not of Burma. So one time, one of the other monks, not much a Buddhist thing to do, he tried to hit him with a stick when he was meditating, And according to the testimony, he tried to eat many times, but the stick didn't hit him, or if he hit him, it didn't hurt him, because according to the meditation tradition, when you are in samadhi, in a profound samadhi, in especially metta meditation, samadhi with metta, with object of meditation, you cannot be hurt. So apparently he was had some sort of invulnerability during, at least during his meditation. And in another account, and in this case we is only reference to psychic powers. He was telling the story about his experience when he was a boy with the bird that I mentioned earlier. And he said, if at the time I had not the capability to read minds, so I could not possibly read the minds of my parents when they tried to kill, when they took my bird and tried to kill him. And sadly, we cannot be sure if it was only joking, or if for example, maybe we have only the transcription of the discourses, no? So if I said I have supernormal powers, for example, and I'm smiling, I'm making eye winks, because he is only a joke. If I'm serious, is another thing. And the according to the Buddhist law, if you mention in public that you have supernormal power, and you cannot prove this claim with in front of other monks, you're out. You became a lay person, and you are disrobed, and you can possibly become a monk again. So there are two possibilities: or he was joking, as I said, or he was serious and he has the mean to prove this claim in front of other monks.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot to take in. And uh, we know that he was connected both to Webu and Sunlun. We don't exactly know how the meditation was related, but I believe that I remember reading somewhere a while ago that he was actually the connector. He was actually the one who introduced Webu to Sunlun. Is that correct?
I don't remember this part. Yes, honestly, I don't remember that. Maybe there is something true in what you said, but I don't remember that. No.
Right. So if he was practicing his own meditation, and again, we have to put this in context, this is not a time when many people, even monastics, are actually doing meditation. It's not as common then as it was now. But to what degree was he encouraging other people to meditate, especially lay people? Or this was also the time that it was during this period, it was transitioning and moving from a kind of forest practice for a few monastics to these urban lay centers that the great monks like Mahasi would oversee and support and carry on. And so this, what's been known as the mass meditation movement, the mindfulness movement that developed, he was living through, in his elder years, it was when this really started to take off. So do we know anything about how he encouraged other people or even centers and systems to promote meditation?
Okay, I think that as I said, in these public discourses, he didn't speak much about meditation. I think when he had some sort of small circle of people and he felt that these people were really interested in Buddhism. He started to teach to meditation to them, not before, and is quite different. His approach. If we look, for example, of the approach that is today, that you have an interest in Buddhism, you go to the Buddhist monastery, to the temple, you try your first step in meditation, and then they introduce you into Buddhism proper. And the approach I found, the approach of Venerable Lokānatha was more like the old Buddhist approach, the approach that even the Buddha himself used. Because if you read the suttas, the Buddha don't teach meditation first. The Buddha started to teach morality, to teach to give some simple advice to people, and when he see that the people minds are ready, he start to teach meditation. And I think I have this impression that Lokānatha used some sort of similar technique in his approach.
Mm-hmm. So he was encouraging of more people to practice meditation before that really became popular.
Yes, of course. And he said, greed, you fight greed with generosity, with dana. You fight anger with metta, be kind, with morality. And you find ignorance with meditation. So, and because in ignorance is the first cause of the other depravities of the mind, of the other venoms of that intoxicate the minds. Meditation, of course, is the most important thing to do. Also, of course, also metta, also dana is important, but meditation has a central importance in his teaching. As I said, he introduced the actual meditation practice not at the early stage of his teaching, but when he felt that people were ready to start.
That's really interesting. Let's go to another connection and association, and that's Sayagyi U Ba Khin. What do we know about his relation with him?
U Ba Khin, we are not sure that he actually met him. We have many what is the word? Many testimony that said yes, he met him, and some other that no, he not met him. Is some sort of obscure his relationship with him. I have as the actual situation, I've not been able to being sure that this meeting was actually happened or not.
Right. And I remember we were going back and forth some time ago that I had read some source somewhere that he had given a Dhamma discourse in U Ba Khin's accountant general's office before IMC was formed, and had U Ba Khin would have different speakers come to take the precepts or to give a talk, and that he was one of them, but we couldn't track that down. I did ask that question to someone familiar with IMC, and they said very likely that would have been the case, but that was before their time as well. They couldn't confirm it, but said that very likely that they could see that happening. But that's another mystery that we have to that we don't know.
We don't as a biographer. I have to have a document or a smoking gun to be sure to that this happened. It probably there is the strong probability that happened, but I have no means as today. Maybe in the future there was something documents or something like that that I have that give me the possibility to confirm this, but as of today I cannot say that.
Right. The other thing that you do go into in looking at U Ba Khin's student, SN Goenka, and noticing that the way that U Lokānatha would give these discourses, talking about kind of combining, intertwining the science and the Dhamma, the Buddhist teachings, that there's something reminiscent with the way that Goenka would go on to formulate his own speeches. So tell us the similarity you found, and what do you think the relation could be?
Well, I have not much experience in Goenka tradition. I follow a similar. I follow the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition that is quite similar. So I have not much experience in this. But yes, it probably there is some connection. I don't know if there is a direct connection that is in the cultural milieu of the Vipassana tradition at the time. There was this tendency to speak about science and the meditation, and or there was only a coincidence. Maybe there were both interested in science, and they follow a similar path. Is another also this is another mystery that I have no mean to make light on, sadly. It probably because here in Italy we say that the apple never fall too much distant from the tree that
Uh-huh.
they give him birth. So probably there is some sort of connection. We must also remember that the renewal of Buddhism, the what the maybe in a not correct fashion is called the Buddhism modernism, has a strong bent toward the science, toward the psychology. Venerable Lokānatha said American psychologists will find Buddhism a great insight in their field of studies, because there are many similarities. So I don't, in my personal opinion, I don't think there was a contact between the two figures, but a similar tendency, because there was this was the Weltanschauung, the worldview of Buddhism at the time. And in here in the West is maybe so also today. There is a tendency to discard the aspect that seem more connected with popular religion. For example, the relics of the Buddha, the lighting the candles in front of the statue of the Buddha, and more on the psychological, scientific, experiential point of view of the meditation practice.
Well said. Yeah, that's certainly true. And we're also seeing U Lokānatha having his foot in both these fields, both these planes of the rational, the scientific, mind body, and that's more the outward facing form, while also certainly living a life and having experiences that are some of more the supernatural and magical elements that usually aren't portrayed in selling Buddhism, so to speak, or encouraging people to come and take a course.
Particular thing of his life I found apparently is a contrast. No, he is a positive, as I said at the beginning. He was a positivist that found a tradition that of spirituality completely different from his experience of his social background, but he found a way to live his experience in Buddhism, not as a contrast with his past life as a scientist or positivist, but as an integration of his the first part of his life.
Right. And you mentioned as one of the features of a Buddhist life that is not so much this outward facing is relics. These are relics from either from the Buddha himself or from one of the disciples or from an enlightened being that are believed to have a certain kind of purity. It's what the pagodas, the origination of why pagodas exist in the Buddhist world is that they were merely to house and protect the relics. And there's a fascinating story about what are believed to be original Buddha relics that were given to the president or the prime minister, the government of Sri Lanka. And then this is another association that U Lokānatha has in going to Sri Lanka. So tell us first about those Buddha relics, why they're important, how they came to Sri Lanka, and then U Lokānatha's integration into that.
Well, yes, there were the relics of the most important disciple of the Buddha, that is Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, Shariputra and Moggallana in Sanskrit. And apparently he was chosen with other monks to bring the relics back into Sri Lanka. So this is another sign of the consideration of Venerable Kanata back at the time, because of course being connected with a historical moment like this means that you have a special consideration in the Buddhist society and also in the Buddhist monastic hierarchy, no? And yes, so this was this occasion that, as I mentioned before, apparently he was prophesied his status as a bodhisattva. So both thing goes on the same occasion.
Right. And so tell us where U Lokānatha comes into the picture to, first of all, I mean, to meet the head of state of Sri Lanka. How does that even happen? And then there's a connection with Webu Sayadaw. Tell us that part of the story.
Yeah, apparently the prime minister said, asked the Lokānatha if there were still Arahant in the world. This is a question that I heard many times in Buddhist circles. Someone say no, there are not. Someone say yes, and Lokānatha say yes, there is, and I can organize a meeting with one of them, with an Arahant, and he presented him the venerable monk. Yes, so this I think is an important point, not only from the political point of view, but also from the doctrinal point of view, because if you said that there are still Arahant still alive today, you take a strong position in favor of a conception of the cyclical point of view of Buddhism, because let me explain. They said that when after the death of the Buddha, the Dharma will decline, and first thing to disappear were realization as a Arahant, then realization as an Anagami, then realization as a Sakadagami, and then realization as a Sotapanna. But in one of popular tradition, they said that when there will be the famous return of Buddhism in India and then in all the world, the cycle start again. So they start again to be arrant in this world. And so I think that Venerable Lokānatha was exposing this point of view in his view of the life. So.
And so there's Webu Sayadaw, who's one of the most famous and revered monks of the 20th century, basically a recluse, is living in rural Burma in Injinbin. He becomes an important kind of mentor for Sayagyi U Ba Khin, who, of course, was Goenka's teacher, and Goenka kicked off the whole Vipassana movement in his organization today. But U Lokānatha knew Webu Sayadaw, and he facilitated the travel of Webu Sayadaw after hearing from the Sri Lankan prime minister, president, this concern that there weren't arhants in the world today. As you say, this is a common conversation in Buddhist circles of, are people realizing the final goal in our era? And U Lokānatha saying, oh, yes, indeed, there are. And he somehow facilitates, first of all, the Sri Lankan head of state agreeing to bring out a Burmese monk in this kind of state visit, which is no small thing. And then also it's no small thing as well, encouraging a recluse who barely leaves his meditation hut to travel to the presidential palaces of Sri Lanka. That must have been an extraordinary meeting. And we've seen pictures from that. We've seen amazing pictures of Webu there. And then Webu is even more extraordinary still. He's given the Buddha relics. And to this day, these Buddha, he takes them back to Injinbin. To this day, and listeners that are tuning in that have been to Injinbin, that know Webu Sayadaw, that have seen pictures of the Buddha relics and the procession in this small village of Injinbin today, few people know the story of how they got there. You know, how did this small speck of a village, which even an hour away, people have never heard of. It's such a small village. How does it have Buddha relics? Well, it has Buddha relics that were given by the Sri Lankan head of state a half century before. You know, this is just unbelievable. But Webu Sayadaw, through the connection of U Lokānatha, goes to Sri Lanka and is gifted in the presidential palace Buddha relics, which he then takes back to his village. This is so remarkable.
Yeah, I must say that Venerable Lokāratha had a very strong political smartness in his life. I don't say this in a derogatory way. He was very smart. He was, and he had, of course, a great charisma. As you say, he convinced the venerable eremit to go to meet the president. So I think that we cannot believe in his supernormal power, but some sort of strange power he actually had, I think.
He's a grand networker of. I think he has the charisma. He has the networks. He's able to navigate this. I also don't mean to be flippant when I say this, but when I started to learn U Lokānatha's story, I started to think of him as like the Forrest Gump of the Buddhist world, because in the movie Forrest Gump, he and the way the analogy falls through is Forrest Gump as a simpleton who just kind of lucks his way into all these accidental encounters, and U Lokānatha is an extremely wise and revered monk who these are not accidental. He's making them happen. But the similarity is that just as Forrest Gump is kind of like meeting this head of state and this celebrity and causing having an impact on world events by just kind of showing up at the right time and right place. I mean, you have U Lokānatha, who's like, connected to, as we've shared here, all the connections of Ambedkar, Mussolini, and the Pope, and Webu Sayadaw, Sun Lun, the Sri Lankan head of state, just on and on and on. All these connections where his influence keeps going. And that's why I'm so excited to do this interview, because when I tell people about U Lokānatha, I get so excited. I just say, I can't stop. I can't start talking about him, because if I do, I won't stop. When you start telling kind of the greatest hits of his story, which we haven't even gotten through, there's still a few more left. But when you start telling the greatest hits of U Lokānatha, it's like you tell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 anecdotes. You're like, well, wait, he also did this. He also did this. This also happened. So it's such an extraordinary tale.
And we don't know much about what he actually did. This is only the point of the iceberg, because much of his life, as I said, we don't know much. For many years he went on radio silence. He didn't write a letter, so much of what he actually did is mere conjecture. And you made the reference to Forrest Gump. I would like more to make a reference to Emilio Sagari, that is an Italian writer of the same that write many books, for young people, books for young people when Venerable Lokanatha was a young boy. And there are if you read these books, these adventure books that take place in the East, in the mysterious China, in the in Asia, you find many similarities with the life, the actual life of Venerable Lokanatha. The difference is that the books of Emilio Sagari are totally invented, they are totally fantasy. But Venerable Lokanatha actually did these things and many others. So it's, yeah. One thing is sadly we must say is we have I give an account that seem quite a happy life, adventurous life with many satisfaction. But I must say, I must remember that he had many setbacks. He was many times was arrested. He was beaten. In Buddhism, they call the vicissitudes of life. No. Sometimes you are appreciated. Sometimes you gain. Sometimes all is good. All is fine. And sometimes the thing goes in another direction, and the people hate you. You try to do something, and this goes wrong. But as the Buddha, Venerable Lokanatha always maintain his cold blood. They give him flowers on his neck. When he was in America, there was the girls that went on his feet with to make him walk on their hairs, and he had the same behavior that when the press told him as a con artist, as a charlatan, and so on. So he maintained his equanimity even in the face of the good and in the face of the bad.
Well, this is where the story takes us now. This is where the story gets even more incredible, if one can possibly believe it, is that we now move to the post-war period. We're in the 1950s, and you think this person we've described up to this point, these amazing stories we tell, can you now imagine this person in 1950s Hollywood? You think about what Hollywood is in general, but what it was especially in the 1950s, and that post-Cold War or the Cold War, the post-World War II period of economic boom, the Eisenhower years, the Tinseltown is really taking off. And of all the places where he could go, he lands in Los Angeles, and he becomes something of a minor celebrity in Hollywood culture in the 50s, which is just, and there are pictures of this, which are just unbelievable. He goes to seances. He He's
Yes,
involved in kind of new age
because
cults.
that is a quite weird story also, because there were this a couple of strange people that invited him in their house in this big Hollywood villa on the hills of Hollywood, and that was the villa, the house where there was previously owned by Rodolfo Valentino, the actor of the cinema. And during one of the evening, they invited him, this strange group of people, and they make him to participate to a seance, to a when they tried to evoke the ghost of Rodolfo Valentino, but apparently they failed, and the appeared only the ghost of the dog of Rodolfo Valentino.
Oh my
And
gosh.
sadly we have only the account of this episode. We don't have the account of the reaction of the venerable Lokanatha in this context, but he had a strong ironic feeling, ironic he was very ironic, very sarcastic at time. So we can only imagine what will be his comments when in this particular occasion of his experience. And sadly, we of course we know, we laugh about this episode, but this is actually one of his failure of his life, I think, because his project was to bring Buddhism to America as a serious path to knowledge, but the the America of the 50s was very different from the America of the 20s. That was the world he knows when he was young, no? So he was too much different, and maybe was not ready to take Americans were not ready to take Buddhism as a serious thing, as a path that became the path of your life. It's not a thing that you can
Yeah.
well, I am a Buddhist, but I also like science, but I also like
Yeah.
the magic
Yeah.
of the crystals, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible to look at that period and look at the news, the newspapers recording him in the headlines. It's really stunning because on one hand, it just it just defies imagination that you're really seeing him here and being reported this way in this kind of, this Hollywood gossipy kind of way. And there is a humor to it in just how absurd some of the descriptions are of trying to communicate to Rudolph Valentino and instead getting his dog, or having Hollywood actresses lay on the floor so he could walk on their hair, as Webu Sayadaw would do in his village. Just these absurdities. But there's also, similar to you, I felt this pain, this kind of tragic comedy of this revered and serious figure who, and I think this is also a testament to, like, when you're willing to take chances, you do foolish things that sometimes work out. And it's a pretty foolish thing to think to connect the Sri Lankan head of state to Webu Sayadaw, but it happened. It's pretty foolish to think that you can convert the Pope or Mussolini, but he tried, and some of the things he tried actually worked, and they're incredible. That they walked on foot from Italy to Asia. He pulled some of these off, and other things he was trying with his charisma, with his networking, with his intent. and it didn't quite work. But to me, it goes back to a discussion where you look at like a creative process. You look at like an amazing film director who has just made some of the most amazing hits, and then he makes something that's just awful. But in some ways you're like, yes, I'm glad you tried. I'm glad that you attempted to do something that looked foolish, because at least you were trying to do something that no one ever really thought creatively. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes you look you look the part. But I think the other thing to point out is that I would kind of push back what you said about America at this time. I mean, this was also in America where Gary Snyder and Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg were starting, among others, at that time, were this is predating the hippie generation, the countercultural movement that was really turned on to these kind of Eastern things. I think he was just in the wrong place at the wrong crowd, and I think that being in Hollywood with B-rated actresses and actors trying to kind of caught up in a new agey seance kind of thing. I mean, if he was in a crowd, if he was kind of meeting the same people that in the 1950s that like Krishnamurti was meeting, and D.T. Suzuki and Alan Watts and some of these other early thinkers, to say nothing of like, I mean, can you imagine if he would have met like, Kerouac or
Yes.
Ginsberg or someone that it would have been a different audience, and they still wouldn't have really gotten him, because there was definitely an exoticized feeling about Eastern knowledge at that time. But they wouldn't have it wouldn't have been the mockery, because in Hollywood it was just really a mockery of who he was and what he was trying to represent.
Yes. Well, what I say in our books, the books I wrote with Venerable Metananda, is that he planted a seed, at least in America. So it was not a seed that he planted a seed. No, so it was not a seed that he could see the tree growing, but at least was something. And maybe one or two people back at the time found something more in this his predication that the simple new age thing, maybe it was at least we could consider that.
Absolutely. So take us to what happens after Hollywood, after the Hollywood period.
Well, he went back to Europe, where, of course, he was arrested for what you call not having a fixed house. In France, for example, he was arrested. He went to Italy, and in Italy there was a small circle of Buddhists that I think is still alive today, as I said. And he went to Turin, that is one of the biggest of the northern cities, and his followers had to physically restrain him because he was attempting to start to predicate in the public places, and as a monk do in Asian countries. But back at the time in Italy, it was very, very dangerous to make something like that, because the fascism was has fallen, but there was some small groups of political activists that tried to incite the return of fascism, or at the other side of the thing, communist groups infiltrated and tried to subvert the political scene in Italy. So making a public discourses with a strange dress, so it was very dangerous, and they had to take him and bring with force away from the public street.
Wow, that's incredible. And he does go back to Burma towards the end of his life. That's where he also dies, right?
Yes, and this is one of the mysteries of his life. Well, first of all, he was when we returned back was the return of a hero. They he was they call him Italy Sayadaw, no, Italy Sayadaw, and he was very loved. All people know him, and as I said, he's the return of a national hero. And he, of course, he had no intention to stay put in Burma. He expressed the intention to make another tour in America and in Europe to predicate, but sadly he became sick. He had skin cancer on his forehead, and this is a mystery because he had we still have the documents in which he required to the permission to going back to America and to treat his cancer. But for some reason that we still don't have the possibility to know, at a certain point he refused to go to America. He said, no, I stay here. And his cancer become still inoperable. And so after a sad a very an agony, you know, a period of time in which he had to face very strong, painful experience, very physical pain. He died in the hills of Burma. And what I know, I don't know, but I presume he had some sort of premonition of his death. So in some kind of way, he had the knowledge that going back to America and to be operated of his cancer was futile. So he decided to stay back in his adoptive country and die here. This is the feeling I have. I have not the proof. As I said before, I have not the smoking gun that demonstrated it. But speaking of with the person who met him back at the time, we have this impression.
Right. So he dies when he's in Burma, and then what happens to his body?
Well, he was cremated, and his relics were distributed, and part of these relics are now here in Italy, in one of the monasteries that near Rome, and the other relics are still in Burma. Yes.
Right. And I realize that we've talked a lot about some of his international exploits and adventures, and also about some of his association with these two great monks in Burma, and possibly U Ba Khin, possibly Goenka. But I mean, there's so much. Again, there's so much to his story. I realize there's another amazing connection there that we both left out, and that's what General Aung San thought about him, right?
Yeah, he had a connection with, as I said, he had was very politically smart, so he had a connection with not only with him but also with the royal family in Thailand, for example.
Right.
So he going back to before the war, he tried he organized many pilgrimage from Burma and from Thailand by feet to India, in which was followed by hundreds of monks. And when in the first occasion when they arrived, they started, as I said, hundreds of monks. And when they arrived, I think only 10 were left. Lokānatha and another 10, 15, and many of them were to be recovered in to the hospital because they were destroyed from this experience. But he went on and on and on, and he arrived in Bodh Gaya. That was his main objective, his main target, the holy city where the Buddha had his enlightenment, and is also considered the what we call the axis mundi, the center of the world on the Buddhist perspective. So I think that also his political and religious exploit were finalized to a project, maybe not at the time not very clear in his mind, but he already had the some sort of idea of what he was doing. He was not a monk who stay in a cave or in a retreat to meditate and to reach some sort of personal realization. He had this tendency to be with the people, to be where to make the difference, not only for himself but for the whole world also. And so I'm not much surprised that they recognize him a bodhisattva, because this is actually what a bodhisattva does, no?
Yeah, and you're reminding me that actually was part of the story I'd forgotten. I was going in a different direction. That's right. That he, again, because of his charisma, his networking, his the trust that he developed in important figures, that he was able to establish these connections and roadmaps, really, and introductions across the Buddhist world that wouldn't have existed without him. And when you read the stories of how he was able to get permission from some Buddhist leader in some country for other Buddhist delegations in other countries to be able to go and visit and have and really trying to create this pan-Buddhist movement. And again, this can't be stressed enough, because this is not how things are in the world today. There is no pan-Buddhist movement, or
No.
there's a very weak one. There's a very small one. After World War II, there was really an attempt to, there was the Buddhist Fellowship that was very important, both in geopolitical affairs as well. And so he's operating within this context. It's not like he's doing these things all on his own outside of a mentality and a desire among other people, but he's operating within this context to want to have a greater pan-Buddhist movement among the different Buddhist countries and regions and leaders that are there, and bringing them together. And he's the glue that are bringing all these people together who ordinarily wouldn't have been meeting necessarily. But then the story that I was hoping to prompt you with Aung San, I'll share it here, is that General Aung San had this amazing quote where he said that he was, and I'm paraphrasing him, but it was something about how his dedication to U Lokānatha and his reverence for him was so great that he briefly considered giving up his nationalistic, independent movement to free the country from colonial rule to simply be a monk under U Lokānatha. It's incredible. That boggles the mind to hear that.
Yes, it is one of some sort of apocryphal story, but I think there is the Lokānatha effect. The effect Lokānatha had on other people was justify a story like this. Yes, and Dr. Sony was a medical, was another of his, was the first, I think, of his converted people who met him, and the impression you have when you read the stories is that you met Lokānatha, and your life became like a black hole, became attracted to him, and you can the strange thing is what happened to me also, and the other people that worked with me, because I didn't know anything about him, but one time I went to a Buddhist monastery here in Italy, and the abbot said, "Oh well, we know the story of this first Buddhist monk. We are trying to find someone who wrote down his biography." And I said, "Well, I am a journalist, so I can try." And that started one sort of domino effect that bring some extraordinary experience for me and for also the other people that worked like me. So the Lokānatha effect still continues even before he's dead.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought up your own personal story to it, because that was one of my concluding questions where I wanted to go, is to look at, you know, we've talked about his U Lokānatha's extraordinary life and meaning, historical meaning as well, and we spent a lot of time on this, but we haven't really looked at the personal connection of, you are also an Italian meditator who has who's developed an interest in Buddhism and particular forms of Burmese Buddhism, and so you mentioned kind of being sucked into this project, and then it really just pulling you and being absorbed by it. So talk a little bit about what the personal impact has been about going so deep into this character in his life.
Well, for me, my story is I don't have to tell my story in much detail, because it is not as interesting as a Lokānatha story, but it's quite similar, because I also was raised as a Catholic Roman. I also became some sort of positivist. I also met Buddhism, and I also started to practice. I still don't have taken the robe as a monk, but maybe one day I will do this step. And yes, and as I said earlier, it changed my life, because now with Venerable Metananda, we are some sort of official biographer of Lokānatha. No, is a figure that in Italy is not much known, because here in Italy, when you say to another Italian, well, I am a Buddhist, he think Soka Gakkai. Buddhism is Soka Gakkai. There is some small Zen communities, small Tibetan communities, but Buddhism in Italy is mainly Soka Gakkai. So I involuntarily we became, as I said, the some sort of biographer of Lokānatha, and I started also a project on Facebook and Instagram to try to publicate some of his discourses, and is a not a full-time job, but is sometimes became yes second job for me. Like I am a journalist, but when I have some spare time, I dedicate myself at least one time a week to bring forth his legacy, because it is a legacy. It's not only the teaching. It's not only it's not only a teacher that give interesting teachings about Buddhism. Is a figure you must know on full to appreciate him, and so this is my and the my job, my vocation, and I think also the job and the vocation of the other thing that they work with me.
fine. So you segue from going from the journalistic and scholastic study of U Lokānatha to this personal reflection of what it has meant to you. And so as a practitioner, as a meditator, would you say that the way that you approach your practice or think about your practice, has it been changed at all by learning U Lokānatha's story?
My practice is quite similar to Vipassana tradition that of Goenka. As I said, I am a follower of Mahasi Sayadaw tradition. So on the technical aspect, I will say no, because there was already on this, maybe the not the same line, but near the same line. It changed? It changed my perspective on the way to face difficulties. No, because when you try to maybe you try to meditate and there is some problem that came back to your mind. There is some small talk you had before that continue to bring back in your memory, and then you say, well, but I what will do Venerable Lokānatha in my place, no? And this could be, I think, a strong reminder of what you are doing. You are not doing a simple mental exercise. You are not doing a thing for be, the for be the most smart man in your to have to say to your friend, well, I meditate, you should try, but you're doing something that has the potential to change your life, and also the life of the other people you have around of you, because if you are meditating, you still you very soon you find that even other people look at you in a different way. I don't know if it happens also to you, but this is and so yes, Lokānatha is I think an exemplary Buddhist, not because he was a monk, and neither because he was a teacher, but because he was a human being that had a purpose in his life, and tried everything you can possibly imagine to reach that purpose. And I think not only for a Buddhist, but for all humanity, this will be is the way to live a life that has a meaning. No.
So that's a great explanation of how U Lokānatha has impacted you personally. I now want to pose a question about the historical record. And we can call U Lokānatha something of a lost figure in looking at the spread of Dhamma and spread of Buddhism, along with, we did an episode recently on Leon Wright. This was episode number 205 for those that want to go back and listen. Leon Wright was an African-American diplomat in the 1950s who was appointed a meditation teacher by Sayagyi U Ba Khin, another amazing figure who was kind of lost to history, and yet his life is also just filled with all kinds of important things to flesh out and to talk about. And there's the book The Irish Monk that Alicia Turner and a couple other co-authors wrote a few years ago, was looking at Dhammaloka, I think it was, who was one of the earliest recorded Western monks in Burma in the late 19th century. And he's another character that's being brought out. So it's so interesting to have these examinations of these critical people that cross so many different boundaries in ways that we don't even think of today. I mean, when we just go back to U Lokānatha, and certainly when we look at these other figures, Dhammaloka and Leon Wright, you have the same kind of intersection of a lot of different things that their lives are so full. And with U Lokānatha, we have everything from, fascist powers and post World War II, Cold War, nuclear proliferation, and the pan-Buddhist movement he's trying to create, and all of these things he's got his fingers in. It's just amazing that one person was so connected on the highest levels of, science and Hollywood and heads of state, and yet also at the ground of like Lun Sayadaw and Webu Sayadaw and some of these recluses that no matter how much power or money you have, it doesn't allow you to associate with someone of this level of mind and state, what they've reached. And so I guess my question is just like we've spent 2 hours talking, trying to recollect and share our audience who this figure was and why he was important. But I'm wondering, how would you respond to the question of why should we care about this? Why should, beyond just the interest of these incredible anecdotes that are so interesting and animate us, why is this important? And more importantly, how does it connect to us today? How does knowing this and learning this and appreciating this help us better understand where we are today for those that are listening, that are practitioners, that have a meditation practice, looking at our own practice today and how we're the ease of being able to learn and practice in ways there weren't before. How is U Lokānatha's story relevant to practitioners in contemporary times that are finding their own meditation?
Okay, apart from the human point of view that we are already discussed, is because if you miss Lokānatha, we miss an important piece of history. We miss the connection you mentioned earlier. The look we have on Buddhism today is something that already is is today, and it was ever even in the past was like today. No, it's false. Is not true.
Right.
Buddhism has changed. Buddhism became Buddhism. As I said, Buddhism was disappearing from India, for example. We today we think of the Buddha, we think of India. In the time of Lokānatha, Buddhism was India was Hinduism. There was no Buddhism. In America, Buddhism was only maybe a thing you read in the books. So if we today have the opportunity to go to the web, to go to the monastery and read the translation of ancient text that for centuries were only read by the monks in Asian countries, we will have to thanks also people like Venerable Lokānatha that tried his best to bring Buddhism in a form compatible with the mindset of Westerners, and but never diluting it in a sort of, like I said before, New Age way. It was a form of Buddhism, not the traditional Buddhism, of course, but it was neither Western Buddhism that became mixed with who knows, theosophy or spiritism or other thing. The core of the Buddhist teaching that Lokānatha give to America is the same teaching that give the Buddha 2,500 years ago, I think.
That's lovely. That's great. I thank you so much for sharing this story. This has been years in the making of trying to get this conversation, and I'm so glad we have this recorded, because sometimes I just tell people there's this amazing story about this Italian monk, and there's nowhere to really go to to just understand the impact in one place that you can absorb. And so I'm so glad that we have this talk with you. But then I also want to alert readers where they can follow your work. I know you've done a lot in Italian. I don't know how much is in English, but for those that want to learn more, where can they go?
Sadly, in English there is not much. There is only a new edition of The Light of Truth. That is a book that with the discourses that Venerable Lokānatha give in Singapore before going to America for his tour. And in English, there is only and of course there are the older edition of many of his works. There is an edition of the truth we set you free and other things. In Italian, I have a Facebook page that is in Italian is the title is the same of the book Lokānatha, il primo monaco buddista italiano, and on Instagram I have a sort of mirror page because the posts are nearly the same, maybe a bit more condensed because Instagram has another finality respect Facebook, and on Instagram Lokānatha Terra you find it. There is you find some of the discourses and also reflection on Buddhism in the perspective of the life of Venerable Lokānatha.
Well, thank you for that. I thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share this in depth.
Thank you to you.
It's just wonderful.
My only hope is, apart from my bad English, that I hope will be not much an obstacle to the comprehension of this podcast. I wish to thank you and all the listeners. And I hope to present. I don't know when, but is one of my hopes to present the biography of Venerable Lokānatha in English in an English translation, so also English people could read our work. That is not, as I said, not only my work, but a team works that has had a profound impact on your life and still have.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We'll look out for that and make sure to promote it out whenever any new developments come. Thank you so much for taking the time and tell us all of these amazing stories in such detail.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. As regular listeners are aware, we often remind our audience about our nonprofit mission, Better Burma, at the end of a show. Truth be told, fundraising is hard work, and I can personally attest to the fact that it's really no fun to keep asking for contributions. Yet, the situation on the ground now in Myanmar is so distressing that we continue to do so on behalf of the Burmese people. What is most helpful at this time are recurring donations, which help alleviate both the stress and time involved in fundraising. If you are able to pledge a certain amount per month, our team can plan around having at least a consistent minimum amount to work within each month. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects, as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause in both websites except credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.
Yeah.